Today we're going to continue our work on the introduction to writing and solving percent word problems. And this is part 3, finding the percent. And so this may be perhaps the most challenging, but we'll wait and see whether you find that to be true. We're going to write and solve an equation for each problem. There is another method, and we could use the proportion method, but we're going to finish this equation method. We're going to use the variable r to represent when we see what percent. Today, they're not going to tell us the percent. We're going to see the words what percent. That's what we need to find. And then we're going to substitute for the part and the whole, or otherwise known as the total, in our formula. But we have one additional step. Our answer is going to be a decimal, and we need to convert the decimal to a percent as a final step. So let's try our first example. Cameron earned $200 last summer mowing lawns. He spent $60 on some clothes. What percent of his earnings did he spend on clothes? So we're going to start by highlighting our information. He earned $200 last summer. He spent $60 on some clothes. And what percent? So we don't know the percent. So let's start there. We don't know the percent. So we're going to, where we see that R, it's going to have to stay R because we don't know a number. $200 is the total that he earned, and he spent part of that, which is $60, on clothing. So we're going to start our equation like this. We know the part that he spent was $60. We don't know the rate, the percentage rate, but we do know that the total is $200. Now, we're not necessarily used to seeing the variable first and the number second, so I'm going to rewrite this as 200 times R. And we're used to, and we don't necessarily have to have the parentheses around it. So now we want to solve. We are going to divide by 200 because we want the R isolated by itself. So I'm going to divide by 200 here. So pause the video and take 60 divided by 200. And that answer is 0 3/10 equals R. However, we need R to be a percentage, and right now it's a decimal. So as we just discussed earlier, we have two methods. We can take 0.3 or 3/10 times 100, or we can take 0.3 and scoop the decimal 2 places to the right. So 0.3 would now be 030 and the points at the end. So either way, our answer is 30, and then we attach the percent sign. So let's go back and look at the question. What percent of his earnings did he spend on clothes? 30%. So we're now going to write that in sentence form. Cameron spent 30% of his earnings on clothes. So now let's go on to our second example. 70 students out of 80 like pizza. What percent of students like pizza? So let's highlight our information. 70 students out of 80 like pizza. And again, what percent of the students like pizza? So what percent would be our percentage rate? The total would be 80, and the part would be 70. So we're going to use our equation. Part equals rate, percentage rate times total. The part is 70. The rate, that's what we're trying to find out, so it stays a variable. And the total is 80. And again, we prefer to have our number in front of our variable. When they're side by side, we don't have to use parentheses. Now we're in a situation we want to solve. We're going to divide both sides by 80. So pause and use your calculator. And excuse me, 0 and 0.875 is what happened when we found what r equals. Now, as we talked about earlier, we have two choices. We can take the answer that we're given, which is a decimal, and multiply it by 100, or we can scoop the decimal. And it has to go. What's confusing and why sometimes choose not to demonstrate this is because we have to scoop it two places to the right. When we make it go from a decimal, a percent to a decimal, then we go to the left, and sometimes that's confusing. So we now have 87.5%. So let's look at the question. What percent of students like pizza? We're going to write 87.5% of students like pizza. Okay, I'd like you to take a moment, pause the video, and see if you can set up and solve the third example. Okay, if you need a moment to make corrections or check the answer, you can see the proper setup here. When we divided 38 by 40, we had 0 and 95 hundredths, and that was a decimal, and the question was percent. So we multiply by 100, or scoop the decimal over two places to get 95, and then we also have to remember to attach the percent symbol. And so the question we're answering is Lindsay answered 95% of the questions correctly. So now I'd like you to try the practice page in your packet. So take care and have an awesome day.